Hello and welcome back to another episode of American Snippets. I am your co-host, Barb Allen. We talk a lot at American Snippets about all the extraordinary things people do for our country in service and out of service. And every now and then we get to speak with people who have done both. Today's guest is no exception to the rule, but he is an exception to a lot of rules because his story is like above and beyond any of the stories that we have heard, with the exception maybe of our mutual friend Hamidi Jassim, who linked us up. We're going to talk about him a little too. We interviewed Hamidi back in episode 21, I think it was. Hamidi calls himself the terrorist whisperer. He was an Iraqi national who became one of our country's greatest intelligence assets there. His story is phenomenal as well, packed with just unbelievable courage and tenacity. And until this day, although I've met a lot of people, I've never met somebody with a story so similarly, almost like just incredible to believe, the service and the mindset that goes forth in them. Ephraim Mattos was a Navy SEAL. And when he left the Navy SEALs, he didn't just return back to the civilian world and adjust and get that 9-to-5 job. He took it upon himself to go to Iraq, to combat zone as a volunteer with an organization called the Free Burma Rangers. For me, this was my first introduction to that organization. It is so unbelievably extraordinary what these people do. Everybody that Ephraim worked with and talked about in the book is just like another species of human being, I think, when it comes to courage and service. And Ephraim, I am so excited to have you here today to share your story. And I can't thank you enough for A, for all you've done and continue to do in your work, and B, for taking the time to sit down and speak with us today.
Well, it's a pleasure to serve. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no. So our friend Hamidi, I'm not sure how you met him or know him, but you clearly know his story as an Iraqi national. And so I found the tie between you guys and what he did. He speaks about the Iraqi National Army in such a different way than you speak about in your book and in your service. I'm so excited to get to all that. Can you take us from the beginning, though? We're going to rush through. I know you're a Navy SEAL, and we're not going to spend too much time on that, but I do want to talk a little bit about your background because it's important. You were just 19 years old when you...
Yes, I was 19 years old when I started going through Hell Week, but I actually enlisted in the Navy when I was 17, shipped off to boot camp when I was 18, and then did the bulk of SEAL training when I was 19 years old and turned 20 right before graduating.
I mean, and
as a SEAL.
Even before that, I have your book. I'm going to hold the book up here for the video version of this. People, podcasts won't see, but on YouTube, you will be able to see it. This book, I blew through it, but I had to go slowly too because I wanted to take notes. It's amazing. And so I'm going to ask you a lot of questions that I pull from this book. And
absolutely.
In this book, you talk about growing up in Milwaukee in a middle-class family, and you were in a devout Baptist family. I grew up in a devout Catholic family with strict regulations and rules and policies. And so I really identified with a lot of stuff what you talk about here in terms of their traditions and protocols and practices. Can you tell us a little bit about some of that faith that you were raised in and how it impacted you and carried you further?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, I think the morals and values that were instilled in me as a child, I'm extremely grateful for all of that. So I have to make that abundantly clear because I don't want people to think that that I hate religion or hate God or anything like that. No, I'm actually very grateful for how I grew up. It was a bit strange, and I chose to go another route. But so growing up, we were independent fundamental Baptist, which basically just means that you follow sort of the old traditional rules. Girls can't wear pants. You can't go to movie theaters, things like that. And I talk about it in the book City of Death. About a few of those things. You couldn't listen to music with like drum beats in it because that was considered, having sort of like a satanic influence. And again, a bit strange, but very well-meaning. And these were really, really good people. But right around the age of 15 or 16, I started to question things. And I talk about it in the book, where I had a conversation with a teacher at the small Christian school that I was going to. And that sort of opened my eyes to the idea that, hey, you can you can still want to do the right thing in life, and that doesn't mean that you have to follow all these different, rules
Mm-hmm.
and regulations and things like that. And so that gave me also the opportunity that I could do whatever I wanted to do in life, and that was something I didn't realize growing up. And so when I had that realization, my heart and my soul, what I was
Yeah.
passionate about was I legitimately just wanted to help people, and that was something that was instilled in me as a kid. And so I wanted to help people. And so I figured the best way I could do that was I wanted to go join the military and go be a SEAL. That's what I set out to do.
Yeah, and I love that, and I think it is so important, especially with everything going on in this country today, and how religion is sometimes weaponized for people's mindsets to be turned or called this or called that. I carried the same thing out of growing up Catholic that you carried out of growing Baptist, where the rules and regulations, the lifestyle, it was not a good fit for me. I questioned a lot of it, and the policies didn't make sense. But the faith is something I think is so important to understand. And I like how you talk about this, that you can extract faith from a religion. And I think there are so many people that have the same tenets of faith, no matter what religion they practice. But it gets so clouded by the protocol and religion, like you can't.
Absolutely.
So I just love how you mentioned that. I've never read another book where somebody talks about that, and I was like, oh my God, yes. So
one comment on that is, it says in the Bible, and I'm paraphrasing, but true religion is helping the fatherless and widows. That's what religion is. All the rules, all of the other things that people add in, that's not in there. That's not what being a good person is all about. It's about helping people who can do nothing for you, the fatherless and widows, as it says in the New Testament. So I think that to me is what true religion is.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you took that to an extreme. I mean, you pushed through. There were a lot of people in your community and your family that were not happy about you deciding to become a SEAL. And even at the young age, when a lot of people would kind of buckle under pressure and go this one way, you just found the strength to stick to your convictions and train yourself hard so that you could get through this. And then you were knocked out with stomach flu and all that. I mean, it was just so impressive. I'm a mom, right? I have kids who are who are now the age you were when you did all this. And I'm like, so for me, it's like, oh my God, like my kid gets the flu, and I'm like, oh, maybe you should sit down on the couch. I'm going to take care of you, all this stuff, right? And you're like, well, I'm going to go through SEALs training with the flu. I think that's just so extraordinary, just so cool. So you did your time in the SEALs, you served honorably, but that wasn't what you felt called to do specifically for the rest of your life.
I felt I wanted to. The reason I joined the military to help people was, I could have joined the Peace Corps. I could have, done other things, but I was like, I wanted to help people in combat zones. I want to go to war, and I want to help people that nobody else can help. I want to be on the front line, going into places where other people can't go, and to do things that other people can't do. And so as a SEAL, that was the perfect fit for me in one aspect. But on the other aspect, it wasn't. You have to train so much as a SEAL to maintain that high level of operational capability, that sometimes it's like it turns into being 90% training, 5% waiting, and then 5% actually doing your job. And so for me, that ratio just wasn't enough. And I was looking at all the different conflicts and things that were going on around the world, and I thought, well, I can go help these people. Our country's going to be okay. We've got plenty of guys holding the line, and we absolutely need them. And the guys that are still in, and they're still doing what needs to be done to protect our country, and that's fantastic. I just saw other conflicts going on, and I thought, I'm just one guy, but I can make a huge difference over there if I just go over there, And that was my mindset. And so then when I left the military early last year, I met up with these guys called the Free Burma Rangers and flew out to Iraq to do what I thought was going to be humanitarian work, but just in a war zone. I thought, okay, well, I can carry a weapon, and I can keep people safe, and sort of navigate a war zone a little bit better maybe than a civilian could. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll go do that. But then it obviously, as you know, in the book, things just went completely haywire.
Yeah, unbelievable. So can you tell us a little bit, like for me, and I imagine for a lot of people who are going to be listening, your book and your story was my first introduction to the Free Burma Rangers. It is, to me, it is just crazy that people like you all are out there doing this. And there's got to be like such a small percentage of Americans even know that you exist or what you do. And I know it's not like for accolades or medals or all that, because you sure as hell like wouldn't be doing volunteer work if that's what you're for. But I think it's so important for people to know that you all exist and the work that you do for so many reasons. Maybe people can get behind and support it in some way, fashion, send supplies, support, whatever it is. Or maybe there's somebody out there who decides that they're going to look into this and be the path for them. Can you tell us about the Free Burma Rangers and what they are?
Yes, absolutely. So first and foremost, I'm not an official representative of FBR. This is just my opinion from my small amount of time that I spent with them. So FBR, Free Burma Rangers, were obviously founded in Burma by David Eubank, a former Special Forces officer and ranger. And they've been helping the people inside Burma, the civil war that's been going on there in Burma, otherwise known as Myanmar. They've been helping there for like the last 25 years. And doing mostly medical things and getting relief teams into these sort of remote areas where the people are constantly under attack by their own government. And over the since the emergence of ISIS, they were invited to come over and help out with doing some medical stuff in northern Iraq with the Kurdish forces. And when they got over there, they ended up just kind of getting involved in more and more and more things. And again, ultimately, it's a humanitarian organization. It's a humanitarian thing, but it's just the kind of organization where guys are not afraid to be armed, and it attracts a lot of the sort of ex-military types. So when I flew over there, for example, I volunteered. None of us are paid. We all had to fly and pay our own way over there. I didn't get a plane ticket. I had to buy my own gear. But they provide. David always says, like, I'll provide you food and maybe shelter. And that's
I
pretty
read
much
that.
what you get.
And I wrote that down. I'm like, well, with an offer like that, I mean, how can you refuse? Right?
How can you refuse? Well,
and the gun. Actually, maybe some days you'll have a gun or something.
Yeah, maybe some days. Yeah, like before I showed up, they're like, I can't guarantee you'll have a gun. And if you do have a gun, I can't guarantee it's going to work. Like that was literally the deal before flying out. But that's actually really good, though, because what makes Free Burma Rangers so unique is that it's a group of guys and girls who truly believe in what they're doing and are willing to sacrifice of their own, their own money, their own time to go and do these things. And so that's why when you're in these situations, if you're only there for the money, guess what? When the bullets start flying, you're going to take cover and you're not going to go help whoever needs to be helped. Right. But if you're there, you're already fully committed. Yeah. You're able to do some more extraordinary things. Yeah,
you're all in. So how did you? So it's one thing to hear of this organization, and then how did you actually go about linking up with them? Like, who was your point of contact with them, and did you have to like interview with them, or were they just like, okay, yeah, what was the process?
Well, so it was actually very streamlined, very almost haphazard, if you will. So I heard about the group from my brother, who had done some humanitarian work around the world. And so I knew I was getting out of the Navy, and I asked him if he knew if there's any groups that could use the help of a SEAL that do humanitarian work. And he said, okay, Free Burma Rangers. Anyway, he gave me David Eubank's email. So I emailed David Eubank, and he emailed me back. He was like, cool, man, like, come on out and check us out. So I literally just hopped on a plane, flew out to Thailand. Never met these people. They have no idea where I'm going. I've never been to, northern Thailand before. And I just sort of get off the plane and I go find these guys. And so I was there. I met with them. And then they were like, well, we're going into Iraq in a week. Feel free to fly out there and join us. And I was like, all right, cool. See you guys in a week. It was pretty much that. But with that being said, though, I have to caution. There's a lot of guys. Ever since that rescue video came out, which I'm sure we'll get to later on, as soon as that rescue video came out, they're getting 50 messages a day from guys wanting to volunteer. As soon as that video comes out, right? Yeah. Well, you have to go through some sort of a vetting process. For me, it was a lot more streamlined because of my background as a SEAL. Right. I was a sniper. I met with Dave. I was able to speak with him face to face. He got a good sense of me and who I was. And so that's the reason why I was sort of the exception to the rule. But if guys want to go volunteer with FBR, you have to actually submit sort of an application type thing, just because so many people want to volunteer now. And you have to go work in Burma before you can go work in any other location. Smart.
It's almost like they've done that before. Yeah.
They took a risk on me, but it ended up being the right timing and the right fit. And it was good. David's former Special Forces, I was SEAL, so it was just kind of a natural fit.
Yeah. And so the official mission, as it was in the book anyway, of FBR is to organize and assist in relief efforts so that the men of, your mission, so that the men of the 36 could care for the people they just liberated. That was your that was like your specific mission in Iraq. On paper, it sounds like those words don't really do it justice to what the actual experience was. It sounds like, okay, we're going to go support these people so that, it sounds like you're like back here handing out supplies or something so that they can take it up. But support means like,
yeah, well, absolutely. That is the mission.
Right.
That's what I thought I was getting into.
Right.
But that word support has a lot.
It's very flexible.
Well, absolutely. And I'll tell you what, like when it comes down to it, when the bullets are flying, the chips are down, people's lives are on the line, you want to know what? You're not going, oh, I'm not going to go help you because my mission is to stay back here and hand out, water bottles. No. Right. You're going to go and do what needs to be done if you have the skills to do so.
Yeah. And I think, I don't remember the exact line that you had in there, but it was something about like how in those situations when you're pushed to the brink, that's how you rise above your humanity to do something more noble. I love that line. And I think that just so accurately portrays what all of you, I mean, every single person that you were over there with is just an unbelievably courageous, strong person that went and did this, from the people that were using themselves as shields to protect Iraqi, So, I mean, what was that like? You pretty much hit the ground and just went into it. But you're still a young guy, now, and you were like younger then. So most people are like going to frat parties or figuring themselves out or getting kicked out of college at this point in time. But, you're over in Iraq as a volunteer and you're doing, and the way that you write about this in the book, the human lens that you provided to a lot of people tell about the experience, but don't necessarily open themselves up to share the emotional side of it as well. And I so appreciate that you did that. And you had you went back and forth in the book about David Eubanks, how you so look up to him and respect him. And yet sometimes you just kind of wanted to throttle him because you're like, what the hell, man? Like, you're going to get us killed, what is that? What is your relationship with him like now? Do you stay in touch with him?
Oh, absolutely. We have a fantastic relationship. I absolutely love David to death. It's one of those deals where you get to know somebody so well, and you're in such crazy life and death situations with these people that the tensions are going to flare. And I wanted. I wanted to portray that in the book, the emotional side of what was happening out there, because it's not all just pixies and fairy dust and roses. Like, no, there's struggle, there's doubt, there's fear, there's tears, there's terror, and there's there's struggle between the individuals on the team. And I wanted to write about that because it's like, guess what? We might disagree on things, or maybe we're having a little bit of a tiff here, but at the end of the day, like, I'm going to follow orders, I'm going to do what I'm told, and we can all still get along and still be friends. And there's no reason for it to boil over and for me to lose my temper or anything like that. So there was a few times I definitely was a little bit frustrated, but it's that way with any leader. It's that way with anybody. Yep. And what's great about David though is when you confront him and you're like, hey Dave, like, what the heck are we doing? Like, what's going on? He will stop, reevaluate, and be like, hey, you're right. If he realizes that he's wrong, he will be like, hey, like, I'm wrong, you're right. Okay, right on. And it's good. So there's a lot of humility there. Dave's a great honestly, I can honestly say this, best combat leader I've ever served under.
Yeah. Like, and I was going to say, you say that a couple of times. You're like, that's a leader I will follow. That's a leader I will follow. And that, I think, is something so worth noting as well. There's just so many skills and lessons to be passed down from this book and all of this. And he took his entire family into that.
Yes. Yeah, so not up on the front line, but he brings his.
All right, so somebody like me, right? I'm sitting at home in my comfy thing. Like, to me, that's the front line, right? So
right. I mean, they're in the city of Mosul. I get it. It's one of those deals where that's his family's ministry. That's how they help other people. And there's a lot of times, the kids and his wife, they're able to sort of talk with and help people that we kind of can't. People, they see a big bearded white dude running around with an AK, and people, can be a little bit, afraid of that.
Yeah.
But then you see like a little 14-year-old girl running around, handing out water bottles or whatever, and it just drops their stress levels, and they can reach and help people in ways that that I just simply can't by carrying a gun. I just can't.
Yeah, right. And I think how you talk about the people of Iraq is also so important, because I can remember even when all of this broke out. So my husband was in Iraq. My husband was killed in Iraq, serving with the military. And I can remember, hearing people back when this all started, you know what, just nuke the whole fucking country. They're all evil. Like, just nuke the country. And it's such a casually offered joke and comment, like, that whole country is infested with this, that whole country is this, and just get rid of them all, right? And so that is another reason why I think stories like yours are so important, because it is so easy for us to get so frustrated at what is going on, and why do our men and women keep going over there? Why are our research, why are our families being obliterated, for this other culture? So it's so easy to just, write that blank check and just lump them all in the same category. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the things about the Iraqi people? You have so many instances in this book, right? We're not going to go through them all, but can you pick one of those instances, or maybe a different one that pops to your mind, and just share a story about a couple moments you had with the Iraqi people that kind of stand out in your head that you would like people in this country to know?
Wow. Well, yeah, like you said, there's so many stories. I think one of the biggest stories that for me comes to mind, and this is about an Iraqi soldier, right? And as you know, like, soldiers, they're no different than anybody else. They want to go home and have their family and live a peaceful life. And it was cool. We had this one guy, and I talk about it in the book toward the end, a guy named Zuhair, and he was an Iraqi soldier who continued to push forward and try and rescue people when the rest of the army was just kind of like hanging back, kind of taking their tea breaks, and just they fight wars very differently than we do. Yeah. But this guy would always go up, and he would always go forward, and he would try to rescue people who everyone else had basically written off for dead. And the morning that we got up and did that rescue, he was out there literally crawling out to people on his belly, because otherwise the snipers will shoot him. And it was in the same area where I ended up getting shot. And he was crawling out there to rescue wounded people. And some of the guys who he rescued, this is what's telling. Some of the guys he rescued were ISIS defectors, and he knew that before he went out there to get these people. And that's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. Right now, in our country, with the political divide right now, we can't get along for anything. We have so much in common. That's a soldier going out there, literally risking his life to save the enemy. Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing, and that's the true face of humanity. That's the true face of humanity that you're going to find everywhere. Yes, there are problems in Iraq. Yes, there are issues in a lot of these Middle Eastern countries. Oh my goodness, there are major problems. Yes, but at the end of the day, like, they're still human. And they're still willing to go out there and risk their life to save the life of one of their enemies who's given up the fight. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. Yeah, it really, really is. That struck me too. You talk a lot about forgiveness in your story too, and how you were able to. So there's so much. But since you just mentioned it, I want to talk about that video. So there is a YouTube video now out there that's gone viral. And it is, I can't imagine what it must feel like for you to watch this and for your family to watch this. I mean, because it's a video of you actually being shot on a mission. So can you tell us, what were the circumstances of that event, and who shot that video, and what is it like to have that out there? I don't know how I would feel about having that out there. Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a bizarre thing. So, basically what happened was the morning of June 2nd, 2017, our small frontline team of FBR guys, we went down and we saw Zuhair, the Iraqi soldier I talked about before. Yep. We went down and helped him move some of these ISIS defectors who were wounded into an ambulance and evacuate them. And when we got up there, we were at the very front of the Iraqi army front line. We were in front of the front line, and we came across about a 4 or 5 lane, maybe 6 lane highway that was completely rubbled and destroyed. And we saw a couple of bodies, and then we started looking a little bit more, and we realized that there were, at the time, we thought there were maybe 60 or 70 bodies in the street, but in reality, later on, we discovered there were more than 150 people slaughtered in the street. And the bodies, not to be morbid, but the bodies were fresh. They weren't bloated. They weren't stinking yet. And basically, we found out that ISIS had massacred these people about 24 hours prior. Wow. And piles of bodies on, people just laying on top of each other dead, people's heads blown off. The most, again, I'm not trying to be morbid. I'm trying to describe what we saw. It was absolutely awful.
Yeah.
And, the people who were like in these piles of bodies, it wasn't because ISIS had piled them up on top of each other. It's because they were all running and they all were just dying at the same time and just falling on each other. Anyway, in one of these piles of bodies, we saw 3 children still alive and 2 men still alive. And they're maybe 100 yards away from ISIS headquarters. And ISIS owns the high ground on 2 sides of where they're at. So they own the flank and they can see down and see these people. And they just left them. They just left them to die. There's kids up. The kids would get up and they'd walk around and they'd search the bodies for food and water. And then they'd sit down. And so we're watching this, and of course, you grow up in history class, and you look at all these black and white photos of Nazi massacres, or maybe something about the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, and you think, oh, I'll never see something like that. That's history that used to happen. That doesn't happen anymore. And I remember when I saw this, all I could see were the black and white photos of all these massacres that I'd seen photos of, during history class. And we knew we had to do something. We knew we had to go in there and we had to get these kids out. There was no like maybe we're not going to go. We were going to go.
Yeah.
And long story short, what ended up happening was the American military actually put a drone overhead, saw what was happening, and agreed to give us a smoke screen from an artillery unit stationed several miles away. And so this artillery unit started firing white phosphorus rounds that would basically explode in air, and then they send a bunch of balls of fire into the street, creates a big cloud of smoke. And so they started firing these artillery shells to sort of blind ISIS. And then the Iraqis gave us 1 tank for us to run behind. And there were 5 of us who went out there behind the tank. It was David Eubank, Sky Barkley, a former Marine, our Assyrian interpreter named Mahmoud, and then a guy from Burma who was there. He was the one filming. He was there to document human rights abuses and stuff. Okay. And his name, we call him Monkey. He's from Burma. And I was the 5th guy. And we got out behind this tank and it drove out into the highway, and the rest of us sort of used the tank as cover. But immediately, ISIS opened fire on us with machine guns and mortars. So the machine gun rounds, they can't quite see us, but they know that we're there somewhere. Yeah. So they're just spraying machine gun rounds through the smoke, and bullets are just impacting at random. And we're right next to the bodies of all these other people who've just been shot by ISIS. And we have to, we're like running around their bodies trying to get down the street. So the Iraqi army tank takes off and drives straight toward ISIS positions, straight toward ISIS headquarters, and we charged down the street, falling right behind him. And I was terrified. I talk about this in the book, City of Death. I was absolutely terrified. I was literally on the border of going into shock, because you're literally charging down a machine gun nest. There's dead people everywhere. You're watching the bullets smack into the ground around you, and there's nothing you can do. And then on top of that, they're also dropping mortars behind the tank. And so, I just watched one blow up like right behind us. None of that was caught on video, but I watched this mortar blow up right behind us. I'm like, this tank doesn't even provide us cover. Right. Anyway, we get down there, and by the time we got there in the afternoon, 3 of the 4 kids that we had seen alive had died from the heat. They'd basically suffocated from the heat.
Wow.
And when we got down there, one girl was alive because she was hiding under her mother's, or we believe it was her mother's, hijab, and she was the only one shielding herself from the sun. So she survived. And my buddy Sky Barkley and we jumped out from behind the tank and started dumping rounds into the ISIS positions that are like 100 yards away, which is basically point blank range. They're right there. And David Eubank ran out and grabbed the little girl and then ran back behind the tank. We were also able to get one of the men successful back. And we started moving back. And I talk about the 3rd man in the book and how we were not able to save him and he ultimately died. But we started moving back, and then immediately, as we're moving backwards, a round just came out of nowhere. Just a burst of machine gun fire just took my leg out from under me, and I knew as soon as I was hit, I knew exactly what had happened. There was no shock, there was no surprise. I mean, I was startled, yes, but there was no shock. I knew exactly what had happened, because we were all expecting to get shot. We were all expecting, okay, at some point, one of us is going to take a round. Yeah, someone's going to eat it. And so I got hit. I fell down behind this Iraqi army tank, which is backing up down the street, and we can't tell it to stop. And it's like literally maybe 5 or 6 feet away from me. So I'm wounded, and I had no choice but to stand up and keep moving, because I knew my team would die trying to get me out of there. I knew that.
Right.
And so I had no choice, but I got up and threw a tourniquet on, and I talk about this in the book too, where as I'm putting the tourniquet on, I kind of stumble over the bodies of one of these little girls.
Yeah.
That had her face blown off. And she was right there, like I could see her right there between my feet as I'm throwing this tourniquet on, and I'm terrified because, the smoke is dissipating. ISIS can see us. I don't know if they know that I'm hit or not, but the rounds are still coming in. Right. And long story short, we ended up making it back to Iraqi army positions. And so to answer the second part of your question, a few days later, I was back in our safe house in Erbil, one of the cities there in northern Iraq. And one of the guys came in from the field, a journalist who was out there by the name of Bernard. And he showed me some of the videos. He's like, hey, man, you got to look at these videos. And so it was the videos of the rescue. And so I had spent several days and several nights in pain and just like basically by myself with other guys who weren't there on the rescue, right, trying to replay and trying to understand what had happened. Like, where did I step? I didn't remember if I had fallen down or not after I got shot. I didn't remember. I had no idea. People always say like, oh, like when your adrenaline's going, everything slows down and you remember everything. Well, we were past the point of adrenaline, and you're in the point of just shock, and now things are just starting to black out. You have no idea what happened. Yep. I don't fully remember what happened to the man who we didn't rescue. I don't fully remember. I hope hopefully one day we can see the drone footage, because the Americans were watching and did see the whole thing. But anyway, so it was very interesting to sit there and watch that stuff. And I remember just sitting there watching it. And I was very numb. I was very numb to it all. But a couple of weeks later, I got home to Wisconsin, and a buddy of mine, a fellow SEAL of mine, he texted me and he was like, hey, buddy, check it out. You're trending on Reddit. And I was like, what are you talking about? So he sent me the link. And sure enough, the video of David running out and grabbing the little girl while Sky Barkley and I provided covering fire had gone viral. And it was all over the place. Fox News, CNN, everyone was showing it. And it was very it's interesting because that was the worst day of my life in so many ways. And some of the worst moments of my life, getting shot and all that stuff. And it was, it's interesting for millions of people, literally tens of millions of people have seen this. And it's very interesting that they're sort of seeing what I went through. But I kind of see it as I see it as an honor to represent the men and women who've gone through the same thing that I have and much worse. You said your late husband didn't make it home, and he did so much more he gave so much more than I ever could. And it's an honor to sort of represent the warriors who've gone before me and who do these things. And I'm just one small story of thousands and tens of thousands of brave and heroic acts that have been put out there. So it's kind of a bittersweet thing. It's it's terrible to relive it, but it's an honor to sort of represent the people who've gone before and have done the same things.
What is it like for your family? Like, and once again, I'm a mom. I said same kids, same age, right? So I'm like, if I had to watch a video of my kid being shot, I think I don't know. There's not enough tequila really to get me right through that. So I mean, what is that like for them? To have to watch that?
Of course, my parents, they saw it, and of course they teared up, and they couldn't be more proud of me though. Obviously they're incredibly proud. I'm sure it's difficult to watch that. I think that's a question you'd have to ask my mom. But it's interesting. I refer to my mom. She's the ultimate Spartan mother.
Yeah, I love that you said that.
Yeah, she is. She's just absolutely phenomenal. She's just a simple Midwestern lady, homemaker who, when it comes time for her sons to go overseas and help other people, she says, with tears in her eyes, all right, go help those people. She's never once asked me to back down. She's never once said, be safe, be careful, don't do what you got to do. She's never ever told me to don't be a hero. She's never said anything like that. She just says, go help these people, go do what you can do. These people need you, with tears in her eyes. And it's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah. That is a whole other level of strength and support to do that, and to know So I guess maybe for you being over there, knowing that your family felt that way, did that help you? Like, you describe in that incident, like, my family will understand and they know. And it seemed like that almost kind of brought you some peace, knowing that they understand.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. But to be honest, when you're out there, I honestly, for me, so much, I didn't really think about my family before I went, because it was like, I did think about I thought about my family, in fleeting moments. And I was like, all right, like, I talk about that in the book. I was like, okay, right. But when it comes down to it, when the bullets start flying, you're not thinking about them at all. Right. You're thinking about the dude next to you, and you're thinking about your mission. But this is actually a funny thing. And I did not write this in the book. But this was actually very funny. So after I got shot, I was in the ambulance getting driven back to one of the field hospitals. This was right after I got shot, right after it happened.
Immediately after, yeah.
And I texted my mom, because I actually had cell phone service in Mosul. And so I texted my mom and I said, hey, Mom, don't freak out, but I just got shot in the calf. And I'm okay, everything's fine. And then her response to me, this is hilarious. Yeah. Her response to me was, at least you didn't get shot in the bull. Calf. I was like, I'm sitting there, I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is the most hilarious woman on the planet. And nobody, that was her response. Her response to me was, at least you get shot in the bull. And my brother
good
was
for her. Yeah.
Yeah. And my brother was in Mosul at the time as well. He was helping drive the ambulance, not involved in the frontline fighting, but he's involved in the ambulance, and his ambulance was getting shot up all the time. And he's an incredible hero as well, because but he had no prior military experience. That's a whole nother tangent. Yeah. But anyway, she called him and was like, hey, is he all right? Like, what happened? Like, what's the real deal? And he was able to tell her, it's fine. He did just get shot in the calf, not in the bull. Mm-hmm. Everything's fine. So, yeah.
Oh, that
sounds awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome. Awesome. A couple more things I want to get through. Some things, some thoughts and insight that you offer in your book. You talk about coming home. And so I spent years working with veterans as a professional, and then in the community that I've built up over the years, it's what I do. And so I hear a lot, and I know a lot about PTS or PTS. Some people call it PTSD. Some people call it PTS. You are the first person that I've ever seen break it down into the two parts that you broke it down into. And for me, that is something I hope that everybody reads. And it just seems so clear when you wrote that, how you separated between what you call, shell shock. Like, there's the two phases. Like the first, when you get back and you're physically, your body's there, but your brain needs to catch up. And it makes so much sense how you describe that. Can you explain it in your own words rather than me just paraphrasing what you wrote?
Yeah. In your absolutely. Book? Absolutely. Well, I think you were already hitting it right there on the head. Yeah. So there's, people always use the term PTSD, right? D stands for disorder. Right. And what I talk about at the end of the book is about how when you come home, there's a readjustment period, right? You are spending so much time as a soldier in an environment where people are trying to kill you, and your body adapts to that. So your senses are heightened. Yeah. You sleep, you sleep a lot lighter. Things that may have warned of danger in a war zone, like dogs barking, babies crying, different things like that, people screaming. That was something that would have, made you raise your rifle up and get ready for a fight. And that's so when you come home, your body has returned home from the war, but it takes your mind a little bit of time, and especially if you've just spent a year over in Iraq, right? Like some of these guys have to, that's insane. And then they were supposed to come home and just everything's fine.
Snap out of it, yeah.
Yeah, it's not. It's going to take some time. So my message to veterans is okay, that's completely normal. Okay, you're coming home, you're gonna have headaches. You're going to sleep lightly. You're going to jump when you hear kids scream and dogs bark. And if you hear an explosion, guess what? You're probably going to hit the ground, because that's what you just did for a year. And that's totally natural. That'll eventually kind of go away. But the other side to that is something that I don't know the proper medical term for it. And I've talked with other veterans. And so we use the term moral injury. Mm-hmm. When you were morally injured overseas, this is where the real quote unquote PTSD comes from. This is how does a soldier who is courageous and heroic in battle come home and start hurting people who he loves? How does somebody who's survived so much come home and commit suicide? How is it that they're so disciplined, but then all of a sudden they fall prey to drugs and alcohol? How does that happen? And it's because something called moral injury. And moral injury is something where they, on a moral level, were injured by what happened. And what I mean by that is they watched a friend die. They showed cowardice in battle and nobody knows about it. They have hatred for themselves, or they have hatred for their enemy. They're angry at the enemy. They blame the enemy for their death of their friend, or they blame their country or their commander or whoever for making a stupid call and sending them somewhere that they didn't want to go. And there's this damage that happens on the level of your soul that needs to be dealt with. And for me, what I believe it simply comes down to it's one form of hatred or another. And there's this sort of righteous indignation that guys return with when they come home from war, and it's, oh, the enemy, they're the savages and I hate them. And you want to know what? Yeah, like when we face them in battle, yeah, we're going to throw down and we're going to crush them. Mm-hmm. But if you bring that hatred of the enemy home, if you bring that hatred of yourself home, if you bring the hatred of your country or your commanding officer, whoever made whatever decision that they made that, caused you problems,
right,
that is going to eat you alive, because guess what? We as humans cannot handle that. There's that old biblical saying, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord, right? That doesn't mean that you can't get revenge. That doesn't mean that justice can't be served. That simply means that the spirit of vengeance itself is something that you cannot handle. You have to let God handle that. And, if you don't believe in God, like, bottom line, you just don't let yourself harbor up a bunch of hatred, because guess what? You can't handle it. It will eat you alive. And so that's the real problem that guys have when they come home. I've seen terrible, terrible things.
Yeah.
Things that I can't even, I won't repeat. Stuff I didn't even put in the book because it's so awful and terrible. But I sleep perfectly fine at night. There's a sadness there. There's a part of you that will never return from the battlefield. And I talk about that in the book. Like, there's a sadness that's just never going to go away. Right. Like, your innocence is lost. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, you can still become a functioning part of society and move on with your life and move on with peace. I have perfect peace about everything, because at the end of the day, I gave up my hatred for the enemy. And as corny as it sounds, when I went into battle, I made the decision that I was going to fill my heart with love for the people who were standing behind me and not with hatred for the people who stood against me. And that's an extremely important thing that I think can really help a lot of guys. And so since my book came out, oh my goodness, I've gotten messages from so many grown men saying, good, dude, I was crying when I read this. Thank you for this. This helped me. This is like, oh my goodness, it makes so much sense now.
Yes. Thank
you. I'll work on this, and that to me is like, that's why I wrote the book. I was like, boom, like that's what I want. And so it's an incredible, there's an incredible message there at the end.
Yeah, there is. And like they said, I got to that part, I was like, oh, damn, man. Because, the ripple effect that you may not know of, that same message applies to so many people in extension, beyond combat veterans. It 100% applies to the families of those who are killed. For me, my husband was murdered by a fellow soldier, right? And then the military let the guy go. So there's a lot of hatred. And I talk a lot about that exact message that you somehow figured out while you were in there doing it. Took me personally years to realize, like, that's what was destroying. I had this hatred, like, it did destroy me. It led to decisions that destroyed my life. And I know so many other people who are going through the same thing, even outside of the military, right? Terrible things happen all the time. People kill each other all the time. And there are families, people left behind, and they're carrying on to hatred for something. And then you could trickle it down to somebody who cheated on you or whatever. But you could break that up into so many things. And so that message, while 100% spot on for combat veterans, it is something that extends to everybody, like whatever the hatred is that you are hanging on to. And I think if you had started out the book with that message, maybe it'd be like, oh, that's a good message, right? But by the time you get to the end of the book, you're so invested in everything that's happening. And like, I'm outraged for everything that happened over there, right? And I was like angry when I'm reading this book, right? And then I get to that part and said, oh, he's right. And it kind of, it was so beautifully done and laid out in that sequence that it needed to be laid out in. So that's a message that I hope that everybody gets to. I'm going to hold up this book another time. We're going to talk about one more thing, but this is your book, City of Death, and you wrote it with Scott McEwen. And I would highly recommend everybody go pick up this book. I'm going to throw out there, if somebody wants to leave us a podcast review and on this episode, tell us what impacted them the most, I'll buy a copy of this book and I'll send it to them for them. I'll do that for the first 5 people that leave a review on this particular episode. I'll mail them a copy of your book because I think it's so important I just love this book. And I love the story. I mean, I hate it and I love it at the same time. But before we go, I want to give you a chance to talk about the work that you're doing today, because you didn't even just stop now.
No.
I mean, the work you're doing today is it White Mountain Research?
Yes, I'm technically employed by the White Mountain Research. We work for the Nazarene Fund.
Okay. So go ahead and talk about that, because that is something else that we have no idea this stuff exists. Like, nobody knows this stuff is happening unless you're directly involved. So it's
Absolutely.
so cool.
Absolutely. So what I do now is I'm the East Asia operations manager for the Nazarene Fund. The Nazarene Fund is a organization that was started by Glenn Beck, that was helping to rescue people from ISIS and still continues to rescue and repatriate people from ISIS. And they're getting back literally ISIS slaves, and they've conducted operations to get these people out.
Crazy.
I now run the East Asia portion of that. So they've expanded into Burma. So I'm actually now working over in Burma, helping with the ethnic minorities over there who are being massacred. And there's all sorts of genocide. It doesn't end. It's continuing on. And so the Nazarene Fund sent me over there to help and set up operations there. So we're in the jungle. We're there with these people in the middle of the worst of circumstances, and we're helping them to defend themselves. We're helping to get them aid and whatever it is that they need to help survive. And I can't go into too much detail on it, just because of operational security and stuff like that. But suffice it to say, it's similar stuff to the book City of Death that goes on.
If somebody sitting here listening to this or reading your story wants to somehow help towards the same end that you're working on, how is that possible?
Well, a couple things that they can do. One is, first of all, share the message, share what's going on. Social media is such an important and powerful thing. It's funny. I made a post a few days ago in response to some comments from a media person, and it's blowing up. Like there's just this morning, I have 150 new likes on it. Just insane, tens of thousands of shares. And so social media is extremely important. Speak the truth, tell what's going on. So that's one thing you can do. The other thing is obviously you can give. So for example, like the Nazarene Fund, we run completely off of donations from people, and we have, and of all organizations I've worked with, the Nazarene Fund uses money the most appropriate of any organization I've ever seen and worked with, and I've worked with probably about a dozen now. They use it extremely well. Not that other organizations don't, but we use it extremely well. And so, for example, this operation that's going on in Burma, instead of sending a full team of 15 people to go do it, they send me. That's it. I'm the only person. So that keeps costs way down. And then I work with the local population to get them up and running so they can help themselves. So it's a very, very good program that I truly believe in, and that's why I do what I do.
Yeah. So where can people find that online to donate?
TheNazareneFund.org.
Okay.
And there's all kinds of stuff on there about our missions and kind of what we're doing. And then if other people want to reach out to me personally and sort of talk off the record about things in a little bit more detail, I'm always open for that as well. So they can find me on Facebook or.
Yeah, awesome. And you are very responsive. I know Hamidi was joking, threatening you to get you to, respond to me, but you did respond. Like you were super responsive. And I find that also so impressive, especially when you're getting swamped. One last thing before we ask our last two questions. You touched on it, the divisiveness in here and the comments that were said online or by the news media that you responded to. What do you think can be done to kind of put an end or kind of mitigate the huge divisiveness on both sides are kind of culpable of just feeding this funnel of just ridiculousness that's happening out here. It doesn't matter which sense. So what is something that you could take from maybe your experiences if you had a message for American people, like how to kind of nick this?
My response would be this. And actually it's funny. Just this morning, I got a message from somebody saying, how do I respond to these people? Yeah. And my response is this: two things. One is continue to speak truth. Okay. And make sure that what you're saying is true. Make sure you know why you're saying what you're saying. So continue to use social media and things like that to speak truth. But then with that being said, the other part of that is do it kindly, be kind. You can be passionate. You can be, you can be hard and stern on what you believe. The response I wrote the other day was harsh, but it was fair.
Yes.
And I did not insult anybody. I didn't attack anybody. And so I think one of the biggest things that we can do is when you disagree with somebody, that's fine. Have a disagreement, have an argument, let it get a little bit heated. That's okay. But what's important though is that you don't let it get out of hand and you do not insult the other person. You do not attack the other person, because that immediately turns them off to any argument that you just said. You might have 10 facts that prove them completely wrong, but as soon as you call them a name, their walls go up and they're not going to listen to you anymore. So respond with truth and kindness. Both are extremely important.
Perfect. Okay, we talk a lot about the American dream here at American Snippets. It's what we focus on, and we think that everybody has their own version of the American dream. It's what people like you give so much so that people like me can go forward and find it. What does that term, the American dream, mean to you?
Wow, I think the American dream is freedom. It's the ability to do whatever it is that you want to do. And there are going to be obstacles in your life. There are going to be things that, that stop you from having that business or, being able to spend time with your kids or whatever it is. There's going to be obstacles to these things. But to me, the American dream is the freedom and liberty as an individual, work and do whatever you need to do to improve your situation. And all these other countries and all these other places that I go to, the individual liberty that people have is so non-existent. And, as Americans, just the ability to choose and pursue whatever your personal dream is. For me, I don't really have a personal dream, because for me, I'm so busy fighting. My dream is that you can all do your dream. That's my dream, because I'm I'm so that's what I do. And my dream is just that we maintain our liberties. And I think that they are definitely under attack right now, in a very vehement way. Yes. And so it's important to stand up for those things. But American dream is just about you being able to do what you want to do. And I get to do what I want to do, and I love it, and it's a good fit.
Awesome. Ephraim, thank you so much for all you've done, all you do, and for taking the time to sit down with us today. I so appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.